Yesterday was fun.
Yeah, it was a long walk.
Yeah, 2.8 miles.
Yeah.
And I got on top of that giant rock. It was fun. Yeah.
A big slippery rock with a lot of moss on it, but flat on the top, highest elevation.
On the island.
On the island, yeah.
Yeah, now that New York is slowly starting to open stuff, it's easier to travel. Although where we went, a lot of stuff still wasn't open because a lot of the stuff was not in phase 1. So,
Right.
But it still made the trip fun. Yes.
Like that out of the house.
It was worth it. It was
For
worth it.
Yeah.
And we ran into 20 people tops on the trails.
Maybe. Yeah.
That was about it. So it wasn't too bad. Okay. Welcome to Unearthly Upstate. I'm Mari.
And I am Matthew.
And today, current situation, the unpleasantness, a lot of conspiracy theories are being thrown around. I mean, I've literally stopped looking at my main feed in Facebook because I'm so sick of them being posted. And I have unfriended a lot of people, blocked a lot of people because
just to keep that stuff from coming onto your feed.
It's insane. Yeah, and if you start going down that rabbit hole, it's going to make your stress level much higher. But to tie that into what we're going to talk about today, we've got one heck of a conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
This conspiracy actually led to a formation of a political party in the United States.
First third party.
The first third party, a successful third party.
Successful third party. And what was the name of that party? It was
the Anti-Masons. And it all started with a disappearance that happened in New York. Some people say murder. Some people say he took off. All we know for sure is one day this guy was here and the next day he wasn't. Okay, we're just going to say disappearance.
Not the first conspiracy in which somebody faked their death, possibly.
Right, possibly, yes. Now, to set a little context, at this time period, we're talking about the early 1800s. Now, the Masons have been around for a while. A lot of our founding fathers were Masons.
A lot of the signatories on the Declaration of Independence were Masons themselves, including George Washington.
Yes. Yeah. And starting, though, in the early 1800s, there seemed to be kind of this classist attitude towards Masons, because a lot of Masons did start taking on political roles. They did hold positions of power in the towns. So there was a lot of animosity towards them because of that, because of perceived or real things that they were doing in these locales that may have hurt other people. Like I said, some of it was perceived, and then you could have had lodges that were actually manipulating stuff as well. So this started happening. There was a lot of anti-Masonic fervor going on. This is also about the time of the burnover district. Just keep that in mind. I'll tie that in later.
But the development of Mormonism.
Mormonism, yes. Not that it had anything to do with anti-Masonic. It's kind of
not
developing at the same time.
But it's interesting that these developments are going on at the same time.
But it wasn't just in the United States. We had anti-Masonic stuff going on in Germany. We had it going on in England. So it was going all over the place.
Yes.
And
it's an international phenomenon.
Right. So let's begin with the event, and then we're going to kind of explain the players a little bit. On September 11th, 1826, a man named William Morgan was arrested for some debts he owed and a stolen shirt valued $2.46, I believe. And he was brought to the Canandaigua jail. Canandaigua?
I think it is.
I'm not 100% sure on the name of the town, so I may have the wrong one.
It sounds right.
It sounds right, but I'm not 100% sure. Because that's where he owed the money. The jailer had to leave, and so he put his wife in charge, because there's only William was the only person in jail. When the jailer left, these 4 men show up We do know the names of, we can verify the names of 3 of them. Cheeseborough, Lawson, and Sawyer. And there was a 4th man, which I'm going to use air quotes, that says Dr. Foster. They can verify Cheeseborough, Lawson, and Sawyer because they gave depositions there and were verified to be real, and this was their names. Dr. Foster, there's no real backup to who this was.
Okay.
They show up and offer to pay William's bail. Wife's not sure. She says, wait for my husband. They convince her. They pay his bail, pay off his debt, and as they're leaving, he starts screaming, murder, murder, murder! They threw him in the coach, and he disappeared.
Well, now, the same group of men did not grab him. The same group of men that sprung him weren't the same group of men that grabbed him.
See, that's the first account that doesn't make sense, because some accounts say it was the same 4, and some accounts say it wasn't. Say that when they let him out, another group grabbed him. So right there, we already have 2 differing accounts of what happened at this point. But everyone agrees he did scream murder, 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 and then just disappeared.
There's this dramatic display.
Right. Now, again, a couple accounts, what we're going to do with these accounts here. Were these men Masons? Some say yes, some say no. Now, here's the interesting. The Masonic lodges in the area do admit, at the time, that they offered William Morgan $500, some land in Canada, and a horse if he would just get the heck out of town. What did he do to tick off Masons so much?
Well, you see, the Masons were a group of successful people in the local area, and the Masons Lodge gives them a venue with which to network. And all this hocus pocus with the swords and oaths, I think it's just that.
Well,
there's no real.
But they had enough power in the community that
you've got Masons who do take it, to the conspiracy theory level,
right?
But most people
less now because they're mostly
most Masons I meet nowadays, and I have had conversations about the organization with a few, and I even
you came close.
Yeah, I came close to becoming a Mason myself. I was looking into it, but because I'm a Gnost, they don't allow that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So, you've got to be a believer.
Which was funny because at the time one of the anti-Masonic sentiments was that they were atheist. And now they are not. So that's kind of an interesting thing I find interesting.
Exactly, yeah. So having found out something about the Masons, I feel a little bit better about talking about it.
So who is this William Morgan? Why the heck did he tick off these Masons to this point? Okay. Well, let's start with some facts that we can verify. And we go through, you're going to realize there's not much facts we can verify about this guy, but let's go with the ones we can.
The affidavits out of the papers are ridiculous.
Oh, we'll get to those. Okay. He was born in Culpeper, Virginia on August 7th, 1774. Now, even the date August 7th might be off, but I would say off by a couple days. That's not because of sloppy record keeping. That's pretty common back then. You might be off by a couple days on the birthday. Right. Big deal. He did work as a bricklayer and a stone cutter, and then he opened like a general store in Richmond, and he got married in 1819. He was in his mid-40s. He meets this young girl, her 19-year-old, named Lucina Pendleton, and they married in Richmond, Virginia. So his life's going pretty good right now, would you say? Yeah. Okay. But then a couple of years later, they moved to York, Canada, where he opened a brewery. But that didn't last long. There was a fire. It destroyed the brewery. He lost all his money. But about this time, too, he started telling people that he had served as a Navy captain in the War of 1812. This is our first fact that cannot be verified. There are a lot of Morgans who did serve in 1812.
You won't find this particular Morgan on the side of a whiskey bottle, though. You might find him inside of it. Yeah,
but none of them served as captain. So he probably did serve.
Yeah.
Possibly was one of the William Morgans they can find on the rolls, but none of them made the rank of captain.
No Captain Morgan, yeah.
So we have our first doubtful claim by William Morgan. And keep these in mind, because some people, when they retell the story of William Morgan, they take some of these as facts, but when you start digging, there's some facts that are touted as facts that nothing can back them up, and that's the first one.
Morgan starts to unravel.
He may have served, but he may not have been a captain. Okay. He was not a captain. Okay. So first he goes to Rochester, New York. And then he goes to Batavia, New York. Okay. When he was at Rochester, New York, he approaches the local Mason lodge there and says, "Hey, I was a Mason." Now, reports differ. He either said he was a Mason in Virginia or he was a Mason in Canada. Here's the thing. There's no record of him in Virginia or Canada as a Mason. Mm-hmm. But, this wasn't the internet time, so if they had to verify his story, it was going to maybe take months to get responses back. So he goes into Rochester and convinces them, like, "Hey, yeah, I was a Mason in Virginia, and I reached the 3rd degree." And they're like, "Okay, all right, well."
And how many degrees were there?
I don't know, but okay. I just remember he said he met the 3rd degree. Mm-hmm. And then he goes to Leroy, New York, and tries to convince them that he was a master.
Oh, boy.
Leroy contacts Rochester. About that time, Rochester tried to verify his story, could not verify his story. Like, "Oh, man, he's not Mason." So now he goes to Batavia, tells them the same story about him being a Mason, and they let him attend a few meetings while they're checking him out. They get correspondence back from Leroy in Rochester. He's not a Mason. So he was going around and telling people he was this high-level Mason, but the Masons really had no record of him until he started showing up and telling these lodges that he was a Mason.
Oh, boy.
And the one in Leroy and the one in Batavia were just starting to form.
And the lies just snowball from there.
Around this time, he was at a tavern. I don't know what happened, but he left in a hurry, or he was drunk and got thrown out. I can't remember, but his personal effects were left at the tavern. Uh-huh. And they included an anti-Masonic Masonic pamphlet from England and a book from Germany that was also anti-Mason. So all this was happening. Keep this in mind as you're going. Mm-hmm. Well, he shows up at Batavia. The Masons are like, "No, dude, we're glad you attended a few meetings, but you're not a Mason, And he's trying to be a stonecutter and that. So obviously they don't want him now in the group because he lied.
Of course. You can't have dishonest people in the Masons. One of their strictest tenets is honesty with each other,
Right. And he also came and said he was a master Mason.
Yeah, well.
Right away. And you'd think they would, have some proof on that, but they did not. So he moves to Batavia in 1826. And he tells all his friends, "You know what? These Masons are up to no good. I'm a master Mason. I'm going to expose them." He starts getting a lot of people supporting him, including a man named David Miller, who decides to set up a print shop to print the book that William Morgan's going to write. And did write. You can find copies of this book. Okay. So Morgan decides, for publicity, I guess, he's going to release the pamphlet. He's going to, hand out, this is basically my thesis I'm going to write about in the book. Mm. And that's what got his attention again with Masonic lodges, and now they're getting upset with him. Because in their eyes, he's spreading lies and rumors. Oh, yeah. Okay. Dennis Miller.
Very un-Mason-like.
This next bit's going to... Anyone who's got hooked onto the Tiger King show, this next bit might sound familiar. Dennis Miller's print shop is attacked and burned. But thankfully, the printing press and the copies of William Morgan's book survive.
Well, somebody said
the burning. Here's the thing. This is our first major conspiracy. Mm-hmm. Was it Masons who attacked his book, his printer? Uh-huh. Or did Dennis Miller do it himself to bring more attention to the book, the scandalous book he was about to print?
Dennis Miller pops in the TARDIS.
I mean, David Miller.
David Miller.
Not the comedian, no. All right.
So it's David Miller who had the press.
July 25th, 1826. Morgan is arrested because he owes money. Contemporary historians describe him as a braggart and a drunkard. And apparently somebody didn't pay his debts either.
Oh, well, yeah. Excuse me.
And his friends who support him, who are like, he's writing this book. He's going to expose the Masons.
Right, exactly.
They bail him out the first time. But they make him sign a contract that says he will repay them with the proceeds from the book.
Okay.
So now they have a vested interest in making sure this book gets published. Okay.
Yeah. So.
All right.
Well, yeah, it's a free country, but Morgan's free to print whatever he wants. That if it's lies about the Masons, everybody.
Or maybe it was truths about the Masons, and they were upset he was.
Yeah. It can bounce either way. Sure. Yeah. So go ahead, publish your book, but we're going to have to see.
We have to see some money here.
Yeah, exactly. We're going to have to be the first people who get paid.
Exactly.
After you see any sort of successful sales from this. There seem to be a lot of people who are in demand for a piece of literature like this. And
now, we told you what happened on September 12th, how he was either abducted or escorted out of the jail, but he disappears. About a month later, a body washes up on the Niagara River near kind of where the mouth of the Niagara River is, near the Lake Ontario. And a bunch of people swear up and down, "It's William Morgan! It's William Morgan! We know it's William Morgan!" Funny thing was, when they asked his wife, she's like, "That's not him." More than likely, that particular body belonged to a Canadian named Timothy Monroe, whose wife did come and identify the body as her husband's. Now remember, Morgan's wife says that's not him. Timothy Monroe's wife says, "That's my husband," but all these other people come forward and say, "No, that is William Morgan. I have a signed affidavit. I know that's William Morgan."
Yeah, all these anti-Masonics came forward to defend the fact that this was indeed Morgan's body, and mentioning specifics about his fingernails, his teeth.
Yeah.
The way he was dressed in the blue frock and matching vest and pants, but the pantaloons were of a different fabric than the rest of his suit, and he never wore a flannel shirt, by golly, but he did have a flannel muffler. Yeah, and and every affidavit reads exactly like the last.
From the Geneva Gazette and General Advertiser, October 24th, 1827. On the second page, it's full of these affidavits that people, except for his wife, who swear up and down, "This is Morgan, this is William Morgan."
The one person who should have been in the loop in the conspiracy wasn't.
Let's see here. One person said the body had been shaved, as appeared the beard almost up to the eyes. Does not recollect particularly about his hair. Saw Morgan the day he was taken from Batavia, and had known him for more than a year previous. His dress, when he went away, was a blue frock coat, blue vest, blue pantaloons, and old boots. He never wore a flannel shirt, as the witness ever saw, but he might have worn a flannel wrapper. The size and shape of Morgan's fingers and fingernails were similar to those of this body, and Morgan had a double chin, though his face and body was much swollen. Morgan had a fine set of teeth, had lost some, and the vacancy of which he showed when he grated his teeth or laughed. He had an extreme full chest, and his bosom was covered with quality of gray hair. The color of his hair was the same as this body, and Morgan was not far from 50 years old. I shouldn't think that he was about 5 feet 8 inches high. Don't know he ever had a small or kind pox. Had a tapering arm and hand and a small wrist. He had a lump or protuberance on his head, a little above the forehead, and I observed in similar appearance upon his body. Witness feels satisfied beyond a doubt that this is the body of William Morgan. Now, they are talking about Lucina here, and she does verify some of the stuff that they found on the body. But remember, when she actually looked at the body, at first she said that wasn't him. A few days later, she kind of changes her story.
I wonder if they got to her.
That's the question, because, all right, so Morgan disappears. Now the anti-Masonic Party uses this disappearance and possible murder, because they have this body.
Right.
Really fuels the flames, and suddenly we have the third party in our political system, the anti-Masons, who got quite powerful. They did at one point. I'm not going to go into the full details of that party, but it was what do they call them? A one topic, a party that only really votes on one thing.
A single issue party.
A single issue party. And that was it. They wanted all the Masons out of politics. They wanted them down. I mean, lodges were closed.
It's just another networking group, honest.
So lodges were closed and everything, and they got quite powerful, but it didn't last too long. It lasted a couple decades. Because then there started to be infighting. Because there were some people who were like, look, just vote the Masons out of political office. We're fine with that, but don't destroy the lodges. And others were like, burn! you know. So there was some political infight, and the party itself started imploding a few decades later. Well, you know what else happens a few decades later?
What's happened in the Burnover district?
Let's talk about what happened a few decades later as related to this. Lo and behold, Morgan's body's found again. Dun, dun, dun. They find his body twice. Okay.
And how many murders can you find the same body more than once?
Yes. On June 21st, 1881, his body was found again in a quarry near Pembroke, New York. And this is from the Brewster Standard, June 24th, 1881. The little town is filled with excitement today over the discovery of what are believed to be the remains of William Morgan. You mean the guy they found a few days after he about a month after he disappeared?
Absolutely.
Years ago?
Well, they needed to produce a body right away in order to,
Okay. The man who betrayed the secrets of the Freemasons in a book entitled Morgan's Illustrations of Masonry 55 years ago, and was abducted and made away with before work was given to the public.
Mm-hmm.
So straight out of the newspaper article here. The mystery surrounding the fate of William Morgan has defied human ingenuity for over half a century. Now, wait a minute, I thought they found his body. I'm still going to bring that up. Yeah. And now it seems destined to be unraveled at last, when at most, if not all, the actors of the tragedy, like its victim, are laid away in the graves. About 11 miles west of Batavia, in Genesee County, lies the town of Pembroke. And in this place, the bones were found. Some men were engaged in the removal of a quantity of dirt for the purpose of opening up the old stone quarry, when suddenly they came upon the remains of a human skeleton, about 3 rods from the center of the highway. The locality is 2 miles south of the Towanda Indian Reservation, and the men first had thought they'd chanced upon the bones of an Indian brave. But the idea was soon dispelled by the consideration that no trinkets were found with the skeleton, and such artifacts were always buried with the remains of the departed Indian. The bones had been covered with a rock and dirt, and were quite evident that the persons who had deposited the body in its resting place intended it to be well concealed. A thorough search was begun to see if any clue to the identity of the dead man could be obtained, and carefully removing the bones from the position and placing them aside, the workmen gathered up the dirt in their hands, sifted it through their fingers. After some time, their efforts were rewarded by finding by one of the party a silver ring, by which, upon thoroughly examined, found to bear the monogram W.M., the initials of William Morgan, who disappeared mysteriously on the 12th of September in 1826. Okay.
William Morgan, the gift that keeps on giving.
Now, they do admit here, just that ring by itself really doesn't prove it's William Morgan. No. But, my God, they found a lot of stuff that really would help prove it's him. All right. The search did not stop with finding the ring. It continued diligently, and soon an object of much greater significance was discovered. In a small tin box resembling a tobacco box of olden times, in which was thoroughly eaten away by its long burial in the earth, that had dropped in pieces as it was raised from the resting place, in this box was found a manuscript, the writing in which was scarcely legible, although some of the words could be read upon unladen eyes. The crumpled paper was taken to the office of Dr. Phillips, where under a microscope, under the glass, the words Masons, Liar, Prison, Kill, and the full name of Henry Brown were plainly visible. In order to realize the importance of this paper and means of identifying the skeleton of William Morgan, it must be borne in mind that Morgan, as soon as he had announced the intentions of publishing his Masonic revelations, was constantly threatened with imprisonment and with being killed if he persisted, that he was imprisoned for the crime of owning a small debt to a tavern keeper, that he was abducted from the prison and taken to some place as yet not positively discovered, where he was killed. The name of Henry Brown is also significant. At the time of Morgan's disappearance, Henry Brown was a lawyer in town, a prominent Mason. He was found twice.
Yeah, okay. We'll take it from there. He was found twice.
He was found twice. So, okay, theories.
Yeah.
A lot of reports you hear about William Morgan totally ignore the second time his body was found. They only concentrate on the one that was washed up about a month later.
Right.
And the theories behind that is he committed suicide. he jumped into Niagara and committed suicide. Or maybe it was accidental. He was trying to get to Canada, somehow fell
accidentally
and died.
Drowned. Mm-hmm.
Some say the Masons pushed him off Niagara Falls. Others say they pushed him off a boat in the river.
Well, no.
Okay.
Those last two, the body would have accrued a lot of damage, especially careening off the falls.
Oh, yeah.
He would have been falling out of the rocks or something down there.
Would depend which falls. The middle falls, the...
Exactly,
it would
yes,
which
depending
falls
on which falls. And let's bear in mind the time as well. Boundaries were easier to traverse somewhat. And who are these? Canadian Masons that had done it?
Oh, that was another theory. The Canadian Masons came over and took him and killed him. That was one theory I've heard. It was all done by the New York Masons. A lot of theories about who did it. And
that might correspond with the area of the falls that he was thrown over.
Right, exactly. There was also, even at the beginning, people saying, no, that's not William Morgan that was washed up. I saw him over in Albany the other day. He's in California. And there were sightings of him in other places.
Which is possible because this is during the days of the canal. Yeah. But it's a little early to be canal. So it would take days to get from Buffalo to Albany.
It took them 3 days to go to the jail when he owed the first debt.
Exactly. So
it's
that's quite a time differential there.
Let's say he was given the money. Sightings. Let's say the story from the Mason side. He was given the money. Mm-hmm. That might explain why he showed up in Albany a month or so later. Yeah. He had the money. He took off. He was like, screw this. Are you thinking he left his poor wife behind? Well, here's the interesting fact about his poor wife. Her. Yeah. A little interesting side fact, a little bit of trivia. She ended up getting remarried to Joseph Smith. Yes, the Joseph Smith of the Mormons. She was one of his wives. Yes. Just a nice little trivia thing you could share with people.
How many wives did Joe have anyway?
I did not look into it. There's a list in Wikipedia.
Yeah, okay.
And
that's
she
something
is
for you listeners to figure out there. Check
just
it
a nice little aside. So, if you're worried about Lucinda and her husband taking off her, she ended up fine. She was okay.
And we've had other episodes in which the burned over district and religious revival in the early 1800s
but now we got this
occurred.
The second finding of his body, which does lead to more nefarious things. I mean, he was obviously dead. But
the most astounding thing, I think, is coming up.
The buried body is buried with this box with incriminating evidence in it. Okay, so if you think the Masons killed him, why would they put the box with incriminating evidence with his body instead of destroying that separately?
It can be immediately discovered with the murder victim.
Yes.
And lead back to the conspirators.
I mean, it's a manuscript in a wooden box. You could burn it. It's not like...
Exactly, yeah.
So that falls apart for me, but it's
counterintuitive.
It's very interesting that, like I said, even a lot of the modern accounts I was reading that, what were taking these... They stop at his body being found on the shores of Lake Ontario. Uh-huh. So, what happened 55 years later? His body's found again?
Yeah. Exactly, which corresponds with the erection of a pillar.
Oh yeah, you found that, yeah.
In a graveyard in Batavia, they've got this obelisk erected to Morgan. A
year after his body was found the second time, 1882, they erected this obelisk. Yes.
Okay.
And it was done by the National Christian Association, a group opposed to secret societies. And they commissioned and erected this statue of Morgan in the cemetery, and the ceremony was witnessed by 1,000 people, including the local Masonic Lodge. So that was kind of nice. Now, on the monument, it reads, "Sacred to the memory of William Morgan, native of Virginia, captain of the War of 1812, a respectable citizen of Batavia, and a martyr to the freedom of writing, printing, and speaking the truth. He was abducted near this spot in the year of 1826 by Freemasons and murdered for revealing the secrets of their order. The court records of the Genesee County and the files of the Batavia Advocate kept in the recorder's office contain history of events that caused the erection of this monument."
Yeah, one of the things that really sticks in the craw of veterans.
Mm-hmm.
And they've got a lot of words for people like this, but it's generally known as stolen honor.
Or stolen valor.
Stolen valor,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And this is exactly what this Morgan guy did by claiming to be a captain in the Army in 1812.
Or Navy. I've heard it both ways. I've heard Army and or Navy.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's...
There are people who are going to listen to this and are still very anti-Masonic and say, well, you're bringing all those, he was a captain. He was a Mason.
Uh-huh.
There's no proof. And, okay, you could, maybe the Masons scratched his name out of his records. I'll give you that benefit of doubt. Mm-hmm. But why would the Army or the Navy do it?
Yeah, exactly.
Because that falls apart. The only way I can see it happening, and we know it could happen, records may have been destroyed, that may have proven he became a captain. But
we're talking about an age in which anyone who's able-bodied and has enough cash in their pocket can buy a commission.
Right. And there should be a record of that somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. There should be. And especially if they've been cashiered.
Of course, if you believe the Masons are all controlled, they convinced the Army or the Navy to destroy those records as well.
Right.
But they went then to destroy the records of all William Morgan, so we can't, we'll give the guy a benefit of the doubt, say he did serve, okay, he was at the right age, and there were other William Morgans there, but there's no proof any of them were a captain.
Yeah.
And really, what would that do to destroy any of his claims? He had some great, he had people supporting him. After his death or disappearance or whatever happened to him, that book sold like crazy.
You think it comes down to people who want to believe the conspiracy, and
it's like there where they said he was a Mason. No, he wasn't.
Yeah.
The publisher was, at one point, he was a Mason. There's proof he was. So if they struck William Morgan's name off their records because they didn't want him to be associated with the Masonic lodges, why didn't they do that to the publisher who had been a member at one point?
Again, another case that raises more questions than it answers. And so...
But this is a conspiracy that is still going on. Now just imagine... 150 years from now, are people still going to say 5G caused the coronavirus? Or my favorite, this is my favorite joke one, but I got to repeat it. Spirit Halloween was the one that actually commissioned for the virus to be made because they knew it was going to destroy our retail so they could take over all the empty retail buildings at Halloween. That is my favorite one. Okay.
Plus, wearing masks has become very popular lately, so,
Anyway.
What do they sell a lot of?
They sell masks. Here come the spirit conspiracy. Okay, that's enough about the unpleasantness. But just think about it. Just think about it. How many of these conspiracies are going to be alive? A century, 2 centuries from now.
Exactly.
And this one, there are holes in this. There are major holes. Mm. We don't know if Morgan died or if he was killed or he just took off and decided to live in Letterkenny, Canada. Yeah, I know that's not a real place, but for example,
They're gaping chasms.
We don't know. Yeah. And that's what makes a good story and what makes a good conspiracy theory. And the amazing thing is, though, how it led to a third party. A very successful third party for when it was going.
For a while. And then.
Yeah. So we're not going to go into that.
Destroyed it for them. Yeah.
That's a whole other podcast.
That is a whole other one. That is a whole.
But they did. The anti-Masonic Party did influence a lot. Well, one of the biggest things they influenced, you can thank them for primaries. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. If your favorite candidate ever gets primaried out of a race, thank the anti-Mason Party. They're the ones who brought that in.
Yes, they did. But you can check our sources, go to our blog. I'm keeping up on the sources on that better. And just read through it. We have some contemporary sources there. Mm-hmm. That's why the second time his body was found was not mentioned in any sources, modern sources. But I find the newspaper articles, they mention the second time his body was found. Right there, that puts a big... which body was it?
Yeah.
Which body? Was it the guy washed up? Was it the guy found in the quarry? Was it any of them?
Yes, without modern forensic techniques, we really can't tell.
Which you could because, Lucinda married into... He had children. Morgan had children. She married into Joseph Smith. And we know the more.
Do you think you could track down their descendants?
Oh, yes.
And then
especially
take
through the
samples
Mormons,
from
they're
both
very.
of these? Do you think there are still viable samples that might be able to be taken off of the corpses? And
if
then,
you can find the corpses, because where the corpses ended up, they never said that obelisk was his grave marker.
No, they didn't.
So where's the bodies?
So where's Morgan buried?
And which one is his? If it is his.
Exactly. Absolutely.
I mean, I think the first guy was the guy from Canada. Because you had Lucinda saying, that's not my husband, until she changes her mind a couple days later. But then you had that other wife coming in from Canada saying, yeah, that was my husband who disappeared around the lake when he was fishing. Or I don't forget.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, he possibly drowned. But yeah, reading the affidavits of these people,
oh my goodness sakes.
the one I read about the pantaloons and everything.
They were just down pat the same story.
Pretty much, yeah. Over and over.
Almost word for word.
Almost word for word.
And you've got several of them in the article in a row.
And these were people swearing up and down. I've known him for a year. I've known him for a year and a half. He was a newcomer in the area,
it's
too.
It's a bit like watching the news cycle nowadays when you get inundated with one story for like 3 years.
Yeah. And people are always putting their opinions out.
Exactly.
And you start realizing,
it filled a whole page.
And they're copy and pasting from somebody else. What the heck? Yeah. So, I got into this because you don't know. I really can't take a side on this one. Yes, he was writing a pamphlet. He was very proud of that fact. But a good way to make sure your pamphlet sells, abduction and disappearance, get you in the papers. Oh, now your book's going to sell like crazy. Really
if it bleeds, it leads kind of thing, And,
So you could say, in this conspiracy as well, he took off so he could enjoy the fruit of his labors.
Yeah.
Getting a kickback from the money, and he just laid low.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, the book went like crazy. Or, let's throw another one in there. Maybe it was the publisher and his buddies deciding, hey, we need to... This guy is really becoming a loose cannon. Because he was getting quite paranoid between his first arrest and second arrest. There are records of his letters that he was definitely suffering from some sort of paranoia at that time. He thought people were listening to him at home. He was being followed everywhere. And of course, he's about to relieve the secrets of Masons, so they also be Masons. But this also sounds like somebody who's coming down with paranoid, some sort of mental illness.
Well, there was literally arsenic in the wallpaper, and people were still taking mercury tinctures.
Yep.
And cocaine was freely in use. And all sorts of hallucinatory agents out there.
Yeah.
Which to fuel that paranoia. Everything that he wrote in his letters did point to the suggestion that he may have been,
Now, how did I found this article about
unstable.
his second body I was reading Wikipedia, and they always have their sources, and I still found this one source. I was just double checking what they had, and they mentioned this is from an actual Freemason chronicle. This was a book. This was a periodical for Freemasons, written by Freemasons, and they talk about his body being found for the second time.
Oh, wow.
And they talk about how let's see, the New York correspondent of the Standard announces discovery, which should turn out to be true, cannot fail to arouse a strong feeling of interest among the Masonic fraternity in all countries. He states that quite recently they were discovered in the little town of Pembroke, 11 miles from Batavia, in the state of New York, the remains of the famous, or infamous, as some will prefer to describe him, William Morgan, author of certain illustrations of masonry, which is needless to say have nothing in common with well-known illustrations by the eminent Brother Preston. So there they're describing his second finding in a Mason periodical. And they go over that Henry Brown thing, too, and everything as well. So that's really interesting. And I think the most thorough investigation I heard about what happened, and they still couldn't agree on it, was a YouTube channel that is run by some Masons. And they went into the whole history of this William Morgan affair, and even they came up with the conclusion. I just no idea.
Yeah, it's a mystery.
It is a mystery, and I think that's why it kind of survived for so long. And
it didn't prevent people from cashing in on that mystery.
That's the thing. A lot of people cashed in on his disappearance. So would it necessarily be the Masons that did it?
No.
There were some people that were going to make some good money off this book.
His buddies who sprung him.
You know, and anybody who's watched The Tiger King knows there's some crazy stuff that goes on in these groups like that.
It's always about tying it into,
Oh, I'm sorry, but
events.
as I was reading about the shop being burnt,
Uh-huh.
I couldn't help to think about that when they're seen in Tiger King.
With the brewery. His brewery
burned down, too. But there's that bit in Tiger King where the guy who was doing the original documentary on Joe.
Oh, right.
His studio burns down, along with some animals in it. But nobody knows who really did it, even though somebody was caught on camera. Was it Joe? Was it the guy? Was it the videographer? Was it somebody sent there by Carol? We don't know.
How much was this building insured for?
Yeah.
Questions like that.
I don't know about the insurance at that time. We talk about Morgan. But I read that, I was thinking, that's the first thing I thought of. Was like, there's something that happened where you could ask a bunch of questions, and every time you try to point your finger at somebody for doing it, it makes more questions. Mm-hmm. But it also makes sense, Yeah, he did it for this reason, or this other person did it for this reason. And they both make sense, but nobody knows what really happened.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, I hope you enjoyed our little delve into this conspiracy. If you want to get into it further, go ahead. Yep. Those of you who are pro-Mason, there's a lot of holes in his story, which we do have to acknowledge. And those of you who are anti-Mason, there are a lot of holes in the story, which I can see why.
That's the story of William Morgan, though.
Yeah, he's
chasms.
Oh, his life is like a colander. There's just so many holes to it.
It's right.
But it makes a good story, and it sold books.
Absolutely. Thank you for listening to our ghastly podcast.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Unearthly Upstate. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Patreon, and on our webpage. We are also on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Spreaker, Stitcher, Podbean, Google Podcast, and CastBox. Please like, share, and review on your favorite platform. Unearthly Upstate is an Animator Liar production. The show is produced by Mari and Matt Manette, with purring provided by Honey and Lloyd. Research and writing by Mari Manette. Music is by Kevin MacLeod, licensed under Creative Commons Attribution 3.0 license. Unless otherwise stated in the episode, the places mentioned in the broadcast are not paid or contact us for any type of promotion. Please check out our webpage for credit and sources for the episode. Thank you.